The warning light on console blinked red 3 times before she noticed it. She had been reading old research papers about alien plant life, trying to pass the time on another boring night shift aboard the research vessel Horizon's Wake. But the red light changed everything. She leaned forward and pressed the button. A distress signal filled her ears. It was weak and broken, but she could hear it clearly. Someone was calling for help from the jungle moon below. Check the coordinates. The signal came from deep inside the system, on a moon that had no name on any human map. It was wild territory, covered in thick jungle and dangerous creatures. No research team had ever gone there. She should have called her captain. She should have woken the crew. Protocol said she must never go alone to an unknown location, but the signal was getting weaker. Whoever was down there did not have much time. Made her decision in 3 seconds. She grabbed her medical kit, ran to the shuttle bay, and launched herself toward the moon before anyone could stop her. The shuttle shook as it entered the atmosphere. Thick clouds of green and purple surrounded her, and rain hammered against the windows. Gripped the controls tightly and followed the signal through the storm. When she finally broke through the clouds, she saw the jungle stretching in every direction like a dark green ocean. Trees taller than buildings reached toward the sky. Strange birds flew in circles above the canopy, and in the middle of it all she saw smoke. The crash site was small. A single alien craft had torn through the trees and slammed into the ground. Pieces of metal were scattered everywhere. Fire still burned in some places, sending black smoke into the air. Landed her shuttle a safe distance away and stepped outside. The air was thick and hot, filled with the smell of burning metal and wet earth. She could hear animals calling in the distance, but they stayed away from the fire. She walked toward the wreckage slowly, her medical kit hanging from her shoulder. Her heart beat fast in her chest. She did not know what she would find. The ship was, she recognized the design immediately. Every human knew what ships looked like because every human knew to stay far away from them. There were monsters, that was what everyone said. They stood over 3 meters tall with bodies covered in natural armor. Their claws could cut through steel. Their teeth could crush bone. They had been fighting wars across the galaxy for thousands of years, and they had never lost. No species wanted trouble with the treaties existed only because everyone was too afraid to fight them. Humans had never had direct contact with them, and most humans hoped it would stay that way forever. Stopped walking. Every part of her brain screamed at her to turn around. This was territory now. If any of them were still alive in that ship, they might kill her just for being here. But the distress signal was still playing. Someone inside needed help. She took a deep breath and kept walking. The main door of the ship had been torn off in the crash, climbed through the opening and entered the darkness inside. She turned on her flashlight and moved forward carefully, stepping over broken equipment and shattered glass. The first body she found was an adult. It was huge, even lying dead on the floor. Its armor-like skin was cracked and burned. It had died on impact. Felt her stomach turn, but she kept moving. The distress signal was coming from deeper inside the ship. She found the second body near what looked like the control room. Another adult, also dead. The crash had been terrible. Nothing could have survived it. But then she heard the sound. It was soft and weak, like a wounded animal, followed it to a small room at the back of the ship. The door was bent but not completely closed. She pushed it open and shined her light inside. What she saw made her heart stop. It was a cub, a child barely the size of a human kid, curled up in the corner of the room. Its leg was bent at a wrong angle, clearly broken. Deep cuts covered its chest and arms. Blood, dark purple in color, pooled on the floor around it. The cub looked up at her with silver eyes filled with pain and fear. It tried to move away from her, but it was too weak. A small cry escaped its mouth. Stood frozen for a moment. This was even as a child, it would grow up to be a killer. Its people had destroyed entire civilizations. Its father or mother might have been warriors who had ended millions of lives. But right now, it was just a scared, hurt child who was going to die alone in a crashed ship. Walked forward slowly and knelt down beside the cub. It flinched and tried to growl at her, but the sound came out as a whimper. "It's okay," said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cub did not understand her words, but something in her voice made it stop struggling. It watched her with those big silver eyes as she opened her medical kit. Worked quickly. She cleaned the wounds on its chest and wrapped them with bandages. She gave it medicine for the pain. The broken leg was harder to fix, but she did her best to set the bone and create a splint from pieces of metal she found in the ship. The whole time the cub watched her. It did not attack. It did not try to run. It just watched, like it could not understand why this strange creature was helping it. When finished, she sat back and looked at the cub. It was still breathing, still alive. But it could not stay here. The ship was unstable and the jungle was full of predators. She removed her jacket and carefully wrapped the cub against her chest. It was heavier than she expected, but she was strong. She stood up slowly and held the child close to her body. "I've got you," she whispered. "You're going to be okay." She did not know that a small device on the cub's belt was blinking, a distress beacon sending a signal across the stars. She did not know that somewhere far away, a massive warship was already changing course. Warlord, the most feared commander in 3 sectors, was coming for his son. And he would destroy anyone who had touched him. The jungle was dark and full of strange sounds. Walked slowly through the thick trees, holding the cub against her chest. Every step was difficult. The ground was soft and wet, and roots reached up like fingers trying to grab her feet. The cub had fallen asleep against her shoulder. Its breathing was slow and steady now, and its small clawed hands held onto her shirt. In sleep, it did not look like a monster. It looked like any child who had been through something terrible. Had been walking for 3 hours. Her legs hurt. Her arms were tired from carrying the weight. But she could not stop. The crashed ship was too dangerous, and she needed to find shelter before night came. She found a cave system just before the sun set. The opening was small, hidden behind thick bushes, but the inside was dry and safe. Carried the cub inside and set up a small camp using supplies from her medical kit. She made a bed from leaves and soft moss for the cub. She started a small fire to keep them warm. Then she sat down and finally allowed herself to rest. The cub woke up a few hours later. It looked around the cave with confused eyes, then looked at. For a moment, she thought it might attack her, but instead it made a soft chirping sound she had never heard before. "Are you hungry?" asked, even though she knew it could not understand her. She found some nutrition bars in her kit and offered one to the cub. It smelled the food carefully, then took it from her hand and ate it slowly. When it finished, it looked at her and made the chirping sound again. Smiled, "You're welcome." That night the cub's fever started. Its skin became hot and it shook even though the fire was warm. Checked the wounds on its chest and found that they were red and swollen. Infection had set in. She worked through the entire night. She cleaned the wounds again and again. She gave the cub every medicine she had. She put cool water on its forehead to bring down the fever. When the cub cried in pain, held it close and sang to it. She sang old songs that her grandmother had sung to her when she was a child in Korea. Songs about mountains and rivers and the moon. Songs about love and hope and never giving up. The cub did not understand the words, but it understood her voice. It pressed its face against her neck and slowly stopped crying. It held onto her like she was the only safe thing in the universe. By dawn, the fever broke. The cub fell into a peaceful sleep, its small body relaxed for the first time since she had found it. Held it in her arms and watched the sun rise through the cave entrance. She was exhausted. She had not slept at all. But she felt something warm in her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. She had saved this child. Against all odds, against everything that said she should have walked away, she had saved it. Then the ground shook. At first thought it was an earthquake. The whole cave trembled and rocks fell from the ceiling. But then she heard the sound, a deep roar that seemed to come from the sky itself. She ran to the cave entrance and looked up. A ship was coming down through the clouds, but it was not like any ship she had ever seen. It was massive, black as night, covered in weapons that pointed in every direction. It fell through the sky like an angry god coming down to punish the world. A warship. Felt her blood turn cold. They had come for the cub. Of course they had come. A child of their species was missing, and they would tear this moon apart to find it. The ship landed less than a kilometer away. The impact shook the entire jungle. Trees fell, animals screamed and ran, birds filled the sky in panic. Then the ramp opened, and they came out. Counted 12 warriors, each one bigger and more terrifying than anything she had ever imagined. They wore armor made of black metal. They carried weapons that glowed with deadly energy. Their eyes scanned the jungle like predators searching for prey. And at the front of them, All was the largest she had ever seen. He stood nearly 4 meters tall. His armor was decorated with symbols that looked like battle marks, hundreds of them covering his chest and arms. His face was a mask of cold fury. His eyes burned with a fire that promised death to anyone in his path. Warlord had arrived. Watched from the cave entrance as the hunters spread out into the jungle. They moved fast and silent like shadows with claws. She knew they would find her. It was only a matter of time. She looked back at the sleeping cub. She could run. She could leave the child here and try to escape back to her shuttle. Maybe she could fly away before they caught her. But she knew she would not do that. She had not carried this child through the jungle all night just to abandon it now. She had not sung it to sleep and fought its fever just to leave it alone. If they were going to kill her, they would have to do it while she was holding their child. She went back inside the cave and picked up the cub. It woke up and looked at her with those silver eyes. It made the chirping sound again and pressed its face against her shoulder. "It's okay," whispered. "Your father is here, everything is going to be okay." She sat down against the cave wall and waited. The hunters found her an hour later. She heard their footsteps outside, heavy and careful. She heard their voices, deep and rough, speaking in a language she did not understand. Then entered the cave. He had to bend down to fit through the entrance. When he stood up inside, he filled the entire space with his presence. His eyes locked onto, and his claws extended from his fingers like knives. He saw his son in her arms. He saw the bandages she had wrapped around the wounds. He saw the splint on the broken leg. And he saw looking back at him without fear. "His leg is broken," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I said it, but he needs proper medical care. The wound on his chest was infected. I cleaned it. He had a fever, but it broke a few hours ago. He has been asking for his father." Stood frozen. For the first time in his long and bloody life, the great warlord did not know what to do. The hunters gathered behind, their weapons raised and ready. They growled in their deep voices, demanding blood. Could not understand their words, but she understood their meaning. They wanted her dead. One of them stepped forward, a warrior with scars covering half his face. He pointed at and spoke to in angry tones. His claws were out, and his eyes were fixed on her like she was prey waiting to be killed. But raised his hand, and the warrior went silent. The cave became very quiet. Only the sound of the sleeping cub's breathing filled the air. Looked at his son, then looked at. His eyes moved to the bandages, to the splint, to the way she held the child so carefully against her body. He took a step toward her. Did not run, she did not scream. She simply held his son a little and looked up at the massive warlord without blinking. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. His words came out slowly in broken human language. "Why did you help him?" Thought about the question. There were many answers she could give. She could talk about her duty as a doctor. She could talk about research and science. She could make up lies about wanting to earn favor with the... But she chose the truth. "Because he was hurt," she said simply. "Because he was scared, because he needed someone." Stared at her, his face showed no emotion, but something changed in his eyes. "He is," he said. "We are enemies of your kind, our people have never been friends." "He is a child," replied. "That is all I saw." The warrior growled again and spoke too. This time other hunters joined in. They were getting angry. This human had touched the warlord's son. By their laws, by their oldest traditions, she had to die. There was no other choice. Listened to them without speaking. His face was like stone. Then he turned back to, "My hunters say you must die," he said. "It is our law, no creature may touch a cub, the punishment is death." Felt her heart beating fast, but she kept her face calm. "I understand," she said. "But if you take your son from my arms roughly, you will wake him. He has been through enough pain. Let me hand him to you gently." It was such a small thing to say, such a human thing. She was about to die, and she was worried about waking a sleeping child. Looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the cave. He sat down. The great warlord, the terror of 3 sectors, sat down on the cave floor across from this tiny human woman. His hunters gasped and stepped back. This was not supposed to happen. This was not how behaved. "My mate would have done the same," said quietly. His voice was different now, softer. "She died 3 years ago. She was gentle like you. She always said that mercy was not weakness." Listened without speaking. "She would have found you in this cave. continued. She would have seen you holding our son, and she would have said that any creature who cares for a child with such love cannot be an enemy. He reached out his hand slowly, not to attack, but to touch his sleeping son. His clawed finger brushed against the cub's cheek, and the child stirred and made that soft, chirping sound. His name is, said. He is my only child. When I received his distress signal, I thought he was dead. I came here ready to destroy this entire moon in my anger. He looked at, and for the first time, she saw something other than fury in his eyes. She saw gratitude. You saved him, he said. You carried him through the jungle, you fought his fever, you sang to him. He paused. Yes, I know you sang to him, remembers. In his fevered dreams, he heard you singing. Felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. He was brave, she said. He fought hard to stay alive. Nodded slowly. Then he stood up and turned to his hunters. He spoke to them in their own language, his voice strong and commanding. The warriors listened, their faces showing confusion and shock. Some of them argued back, but silenced them with a single look. Finally, the warrior bowed his head and stepped back. The others followed. Turned to, you will come with us, he said. Not as a prisoner, as a guest. My medics will finish healing my son and you will stay until he is well. Then we will talk about what happens next. Stood up slowly, still holding in her arms. And your laws, the ones that say I must die. I am the warlord, said. I make the laws, and today I make a new one. Any creature who saves a child with love and courage will be honored, not killed. He extended his hand toward her. It was huge, with claws that could tear her apart in seconds. But he held it out like a human would, waiting for her to take it. Looked at his hand, then looked up at his face. She saw no trick there, no hidden plan. She saw only a father who was grateful beyond words. She shifted to one arm and reached out with her free hand. Her small fingers touched his massive palm. Thank you, she said. No, replied, thank you. They walked out of the cave together, the warlord and the human woman, with the sleeping cub between them. The hunters followed in confused silence. Had entered the beast's territory carrying his injured child. She had expected to die. Instead, she was walking out as something no human had ever been before. She was walking out as a guest of the news spread through space like fire through dry grass. A human had saved the warlord's son. A small, soft, clawless creature had carried a cub through a dangerous jungle and nursed it back to health, and instead of killing her, had made her his guest. Some thought it was a beautiful story. They spoke of the old ways before the endless wars when their people had valued honor and mercy. They said that was right to spare the human. But many others were angry. They said that had gone soft. They said that showing kindness to a human was weakness. They said that the old laws existed for a reason, and that breaking them would destroy everything the had built. The loudest voice among them belonged to Commander. Was old and powerful, with white scars covering his face and body from 100 battles. He had served under his father and had never liked the current warlord. He thought was too young, too emotional, too willing to change the old traditions. Now he saw his chance. 3 weeks after came aboard's ship, sent a message to the High Council. He accused of breaking sacred law. He said that the warlord had betrayed his people by letting a human live. He demanded that both and the human face judgment. The High Council agreed to hear the case. They had no choice. The law was clear and had many supporters. Learned about this from, the cub had recovered fully under the care of the medics, but he refused to leave side. He followed her everywhere, calling her by a word that meant something like second mother. He taught her games and showed her his favorite foods, and he told her everything that happened on the ship. Wants to kill you, said one morning. His silver eyes were filled with worry. And he wants to kill my father too. He said my father is not fit to be warlord. Knelt down and looked at the cub. What happens if wins? They fight, said. A challenge to the death. If kills my father, he becomes warlord, and then... The cub's voice broke. And then he will kill you too, he said so. He said you and I are symbols of my father's failure. That night came to see in her quarters. He looked tired. The political battle was draining him, and she could see the weight of it on his shoulders. I cannot protect you forever, he admitted. Has too much support. The council will hear his case in 3 days. If I lose the challenge, there is nothing I can do. Thought for a long moment. Then she asked, can I speak to the council? Looked surprised. You, a human, before the High Council. Yes, said. I want to speak. I want them to hear from me directly. They may not listen. They may kill you the moment you enter the chamber. Maybe, said, but maybe not. I did not survive that jungle by being afraid. Let me try. Studied her face. He saw no fear there, only determination. He remembered how she had looked at him in that cave, holding his son without trembling. Very well, he said, I will arrange it. 3 days later, walked into the High Council chamber. It was a massive room, built inside an ancient mountain on the stone pillars rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Hundreds of sat in rows, their eyes fixed on the small human who dared to enter their most sacred space. Stood at the front, his arms crossed over his chest. He smiled when he saw her, the smile of a predator who had already won. The eldest member of the council, a female named whose gray scales showed her great age, raised her hand for silence. The human may speak, she said. Walked to the center of the chamber. She was so small compared to everyone around her, so fragile, so easily broken. But her voice was strong. I know what you think of humans, she began. You think we are weak, soft, easy to kill. You think we survive only because we hide from stronger species. Some of them growled in agreement. But you do not understand us, continued. We did not evolve as predators. We have no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. We survived because we learned to protect each other. We survived because we care for our children more than we fear death. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of as many as she could. When I found in that crashed ship, I did not see an enemy. I saw a child who was hurt and scared and alone. And where I come from, we do not leave children to die. We pick them up. We carry them. We fight for them, even if they are not our blood. The chamber was completely silent. You call that weakness, said. I call it strength. The greatest strength there is. Any creature can kill, any creature can destroy. But it takes courage to show mercy. It takes real power to save a life instead of taking one. She turned to look at directly. You want to kill me because I saved a child. You want to kill your own warlord because he showed gratitude. What does that say about you? What does that say about your people? Opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, something amazing happened. Old stood up, then another elder beside her, then another. One by one, the oldest in the chamber, the grandmothers and grandfathers who remembered the ancient ways, rose to their feet. They were standing in support. The old laws speak of blood debts, said, her voice filling the chamber. A life saved creates a bond that cannot be broken. This human saved the warlord's son. She has earned a blood debt that no challenge can erase. His face twisted with anger. You cannot be serious, she is human. She is more than you, replied coldly. She showed courage, she showed honor, she protected a child who was not her own. These are the values our ancestors taught us. These are the values you have forgotten. The council voted. It was not close. His challenge was rejected. The blood debt was recognized. Had won. As she walked out of the chamber, ran to her and jumped into her arms. Stood behind him, his face showing something she had never seen before. He was smiling. You did it, he said. You changed their minds. No human has ever done what you did today. Held close and smiled back. I just told them the truth, she said. Sometimes that's enough. 6 months had passed since that day in the High Council chamber. 6 months since it stood before the most powerful in the galaxy and changed their minds with nothing but her words. Everything was different now. Lived part of each year in a small house that had built for her near his own. She had become the first human ambassador to working every day to build bridges between two species that had never trusted each other. It was hard work. Many still did not like humans. Many humans were terrified of but slowly, step by step, things were changing. Trade ships now traveled between human and space. Scientists shared their research. Children from both species learned about each other in their schools. And at the center of it all had grown taller in the past 6 months. His leg had healed completely, leaving only a small scar. But he had not forgotten what had done for him. He called her his second mother, and he meant it with all his heart. Every morning he came to her house to eat breakfast with her. He taught her new words and showed her how to play games. When other cubs asked who the small human was, he would puff up his chest and say, "She is my mother. She saved my life." The other cubs did not know what to think of this, but did not care. He was proud of her. Visited often, too. At first, their conversations were formal about politics and treaties and the future of their peoples. But as the months passed, they began to talk about other things. They talked about their families, their hopes, their fears. Told her about his mate, who had died in a battle 3 years ago. She had been gentle and kind, with a laugh that could fill any room. Losing her had broken something inside him. For years, he had buried his pain under duty and war. Told him about her grandmother, who had raised her after her parents died in a shuttle accident. Her grandmother had taught her to be brave, to help others, to never give up even when everything seemed lost. She had died just 1 year before found. "I think they would have liked each other," said one evening. "And your grandmother?" Smiled, "I think so too." One night, as twin moons rose over the capital, stood on a balcony looking at the stars. The city below was beautiful in its own way, all sharp angles and tall towers lit by soft orange lights. In the distance, she could see the mountains where the High Council met. She heard footsteps behind her and knew, without turning, that it was. He stood beside her, so much larger than her, looking at the same stars. "You changed everything," he said quietly. "One small human, one act of kindness. You did what armies could not do. You brought our peoples together." Shook her head. "I just picked up a kid who needed help. Everything else was all of you. You just needed someone to remind you that mercy is not weakness." Was quiet for a moment, then he said, "My son calls you mother." "I know," replied. "I have told him he already has one, will always be his mother." "Is gone," said softly, "but has chosen, and in tradition when a child chooses, so does the family." Turned to look at him. The great warlord, the terror of 3 sectors, looked almost nervous. She had never seen him like this before. "What does that mean?" she asked. Took a deep breath. "It means you are no longer a guest. You are no longer just an ambassador or a friend. You are blood, you are family, you are ours." He reached into his armor and pulled out a small object. It was a pendant made of dark metal, carved with the same symbols that decorated his own chest plate. The symbols of his house, his bloodline, his family. "This belonged to," he said. "She wore it every day of her life. I have kept it since she died, waiting for the right moment." He held it out too. "I would be honored if you would wear it now." Looked at the pendant. Tears formed in her eyes, and this time she did not try to stop them. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "I am human, I am not." "You are more than most I know," said. "You have the heart of a warrior, you have the soul of a protector. You walked into my territory carrying my wounded child, ready to die for him. There is no one more worthy of this honor." Reached out and took the pendant. It was heavy in her hand, warm from being pressed against chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "No," replied, just as he had that first day in the cave. "Thank you." He helped her put the pendant around her neck. It hung over her heart, exactly where had once worn it. The next morning, when came for breakfast and saw the pendant, he froze. His silver eyes went wide. Then he let out a cry of joy and ran to, jumping into her arms. "Mother," he shouted, "you are really my mother now, forever." Held him tight and laughed through her tears. "Forever," she promised. Across the galaxy, humans heard the story. They told it to their children and their children's children. The story of the woman who walked into a monster's territory and walked out as a mother. The woman who faced death with nothing but compassion and won. They said that humanity's greatest strength was never its weapons or its technology. It was not their ships or their cities or their science. It was their heart. It was their endless, stubborn, unbreakable ability to love, even those who were different, even those who were supposed to be enemies, even the children of monsters. And somewhere in a house near the warlord's palace, a small human woman sat with a cub in her lap, reading him stories from Earth while his father watched from the doorway. They were a strange family, perhaps the strangest in the galaxy. But they were a family, and that was all that mattered. The end.